July 13, 1943, 01:42 hours, Western Pacific, somewhere between Rabaul and the Solomon Sea. The ocean looks calm, too calm. Moonlight scatters across the water in broken silver, interrupted only by the dark silhouettes of cargo ships pushing west in disciplined silence. Diesel engines thrum low and steady, deck crews murmur, cigarettes glow briefly, then vanish. Above, the sky is clear. Below, the sea is unreadable. Nothing about this night suggests danger. The Japanese convoy moves in staggered columns, escorts riding the perimeter like sheepdogs, alert, methodical, bored. The war has taught them what to fear. Submarines below, aircraft above. Depth charges are ready. Lookouts scan the horizon. Radar sets sweep in slow, patient arcs, painting reassurance onto glowing screens. Nothing unusual. No high-speed surface contacts. No sudden blips, cutting clean lines across the scope. Just wave clutter and friendly echoes. The formation is solid, predictable, protected. And yet, 2 miles off the starboard quarter, something small rides low in the water. So low it barely interrupts the moonlight. It does not approach in a straight line. It does not charge. It drifts in wide, shallow angles, blending into sea clutter where radar returns smear and soften. Its hull throws almost no vertical profile. Its wake, if visible at all, looks like nothing more than disturbed moonlight. This is not a destroyer. It is not a submarine. It is a boat built for darkness. Engines are throttled carefully, not silent, but tuned to the rhythm of waves and convoy noise. The crew works without speaking. Torpedoes are already armed. Charts lie open but barely needed. The target is visible ahead as a slow-moving black mass against the horizon. The escorts are watching outward. The small American craft is moving inward. Escort doctrine assumes threats come from beyond the screen, breaking through, forcing engagement. It does not account well for something that seeps through the gaps, riding the blind seams between radar sweeps and visual arcs. The boat crosses the outer perimeter without challenge. No signal lamps flash. No course corrections follow. No flares rise. Inside the convoy, the cargo ships continue west, heavy with fuel, ammunition, and rations meant for distant garrisons. Distance closes. The American commander studies the nearest transport through binoculars. He does not need confirmation. The shape is unmistakable. Speed is steady, bearing constant. He raises one hand. Torpedo tubes align. For a heartbeat, the ocean returns to silence. Then the night tears open. A column of fire erupts midships on the nearest transport, flame punching skyward in violent orange. The blast rolls outward across the water. Seconds later, a second explosion follows, another hull splitting, cargo igniting in a chain reaction of light. Now the conv understands. Flares shoot upward, bathing the sea in white glare. Searchlights slash wildly across the water, probing for the attacker. But there is no attacker to see. Only burning ships. And a fading disturbance in the moonlight, so small, so low, it looks like nothing at all. The ghost wake is already turning away. And by the time the escorts react, they are not chasing a boat. They are chasing absence. The first flare washed the sea in white. For a split second, everything became visible: cargo hulls, escort silhouettes, smoke already rising from the first stricken transport. Men ran across illuminated decks. Signal lamps flashed urgently between ships. Engines surged as captains demanded speed and direction. But clarity lasted only as long as the flare burned. When darkness returned, it returned heavier. Escort commanders reacted exactly as doctrine prescribed. They pushed outward. Search patterns expanded beyond the convoy's perimeter. Depth charges were prepared, not because a submarine had been seen, but because submarine was the only explanation that made sense. The threat had to be outside. It had to be approaching from open water. It had to be large enough to detect. That assumption shaped everything. Destroyers accelerated along projected torpedo tracks, scanning for periscopes, wakes, any sign of a submerged attacker attempting escape. Radar operators searched for hard returns beyond the screen. Gun crews trained weapons on empty horizon lines. Meanwhile, inside the formation, a second transport erupted into flame. The torpedoes had not come from beyond. They had come from within. By the time the escorts realized this, the geometry of response had already betrayed them. Their outward surge left gaps inside the screen. Cargo ships attempted evasive turns, but staggered columns created confusion. Some slowed, others accelerated. One nearly crossed another's bow. The convoy's discipline fractured under shock. Through it all, the American boat remained nearly invisible. Instead of sprinting away in a straight line, it altered course sharply, cutting across the convoy's internal wake turbulence. High speed was used sparingly. The boat rode the noise of exploding hulls and screaming engines. Its silhouette remained low enough that even when searchlights swept near, nothing solid appeared. Radar struggled. Burning ships cluttered the scopes. Debris fields created irregular returns. Escort vessels maneuvering aggressively introduced overlapping echoes. The small American craft blended into this confusion like static inside signal. A destroyer passed less than a mile away, close enough that the American crew could hear its engines strain at flank speed. Still no detection. The commander resisted the instinct to press further. The mission was not annihilation. It was disruption. Prolonged presence would invite certainty. Certainty would invite destruction. Another flare went up. This time, it illuminated nothing but smoke and panic. The convoy had been struck cleanly and invisibly. 2 ships burned. A third listed heavily. Escorts chased vectors that led nowhere. Radio traffic spiked into urgency, overlapping reports drowning each other out. But nowhere in the chaos was there a clear target. No attacker identified. No silhouette fixed in light. Only the memory of something that had moved across the water without leaving a shape. By the time the escorts recalibrated inward, the small American craft was already retreating along a shallow arc, using the convoy's own turbulence as cover. The sea swallowed its wake almost instantly. The Japanese convoy had trained for submarines below and aircraft above. It had not trained for something that skimmed the surface like a shadow. And shadows are hardest to fight when you do know where they begin. The success of the attack wasn't luck. It was geometry. Escort radar in 1943 was designed to detect altitude and mass, aircraft diving from above, destroyers approaching with significant vertical profile, submarines surfacing with conning towers exposed. The systems were effective against large shapes moving cleanly across open water. They were far less precise against something small riding low and approaching at shallow angles through wave clutter. The American boat exploited that seam. Instead of cutting across radar arcs at a sharp 90-degree angle where returns are strongest, it approached along near-parallel vectors. Its course mimicked background sea return. Its speed varied subtly to avoid forming a clean tracking line. From the escort scopes, it appeared as intermittent noise rather than persistent contact. Noise is ignored. Contacts are pursued. The difference is subtle and lethal. As the convoy burned, radar operators strained to isolate a clear echo, but the screens were now polluted. Fires distorted returns. Rapid escort maneuvers produced overlapping blips. Debris fields from exploding cargo created irregular signatures. In that confusion, a low-profile boat hugging sea clutter became statistically insignificant. The American crew understood the margin was razor-thin. They stayed below the skyline, cutting throttle whenever searchlights swept wide. Engines were nudged rather than surged. The helmsman followed wave troughs instinctively, keeping the hull's outline broken by natural motion. At one point, a flare illuminated water less than half a mile off their port side. The crew froze. Every man felt the exposure like heat on skin. But the light passed. No alarm followed. The destroyers were still looking outward. Inside the convoy, chaos compounded itself. A damaged transport drifted across a column lane. Another ship slowed abruptly, nearly causing collision. Escorts shouted conflicting course corrections over radio channels now saturated with urgency. The attackers had not merely struck hulls. They had broken rhythm. And rhythm is what keeps a convoy alive. The American commander considered a second attack run. The opportunity was there. Confusion had opened a temporary corridor, but discipline overruled temptation. Surprise, once spent, diminishes rapidly. Staying longer meant turning ghost into target. He signaled withdrawal. The boat angled away not in a straight escape, but in a sweeping curve, remaining inside radar clutter until distance naturally erased it. Behind them, burning ships illuminated the water in violent orange. Searchlights still hunted. Depth charges detonated uselessly beyond the screen. But no one could point to the attacker. No silhouette. No confirmed bearing. No identity. Only the realization that something had entered the convoy, fired, and vanished without leaving a shape. By dawn, reports would describe possible submarine. Others would mention fast surface craft. None would be certain. The convoy had not been defeated by overwhelming force. It had been erased, partially, precisely, by something that used the sea itself as camouflage. The wake it left behind was so low, so brief, it barely counted as evidence. And that was exactly the point. Dawn did not bring clarity. It brought evidence. As the first light spread across the western Pacific, it revealed what the night had concealed in flashes and smoke. 2 transports burned down to blackened hulls. A third rode low in the water, listing hard to starboard. Debris stretched across the convoy's former lanes like torn fabric. The formation was gone. What had been staggered columns now resembled a loose scattering of survivors adjusting speed and distance without cohesion. Escorts moved cautiously between damaged ships, their earlier aggression replaced with controlled containment. But one thing was still missing. An attacker. Radar logs were reviewed immediately. Operators replayed the previous hour's sweeps, searching for a clean track that might have been overlooked. There were spikes, brief distortions, but nothing sustained, nothing that could be marked confidently as hostile. Lookouts swore they had seen nothing. No periscope. No destroyer silhouette. No torpedo wakes clearly visible before impact. The conclusion unsettled everyone. The convoy had been penetrated without detection. At first light, escort commanders faced a problem more strategic than tactical. If a submarine had attacked, it should have left patterns, submerged approach angles, torpedo-bearing lines, probable escape routes. If aircraft had struck, wreckage and bomb fragments would tell the story. Here, the angles didn't align cleanly. The torpedoes had come from within the perimeter. Bearings suggested a shallow approach that bypassed outer patrol arcs. The escort screen, designed meticulously, had been threaded rather than broken. This forced a difficult admission. The screen had blind seams. Convoy doctrine relied on outward vigilance. Threat vectors were assumed to originate beyond the escort ring. Resources were positioned accordingly, but something small, fast, and low profile had used that assumption as an entry pass. And assumption, in war, is a liability. Damage control teams fought fires as if fighting to restore certainty itself, pumping compartments dry, shoring bulkheads, saving cargo where possible, but no amount of discipline could erase the psychological fracture. A convoy had been erased in part, without a visible enemy. By mid-morning, signals were already moving up the chain of command. Reports were careful, clinical, but the underlying message was unmistakable. Convoy attacked, attacker unidentified, escort screen penetrated. That phrase would echo far beyond the Solomon Sea. Because if a small craft could infiltrate once, it could do so again. The ocean had not been breached by overwhelming force. It had been infiltrated by precision. The sea that had looked calm, too calm, now looked different in daylight. Not empty, but uncertain. And uncertainty, once introduced into convoy operations, travels faster than ships ever could. While the convoy counted damage at sunrise, the American boat was already miles away. Dawn is the most dangerous time for small craft. Darkness protects, daylight exposes. The same low profile that erased radar returns at night becomes fragile under open sky. Aircraft patrols launch. Destroyers widen their search grids. Wake lines become visible from altitude. The crew knew this. They did not run at full throttle. Speed leaves scars on water. Instead, they settled into disciplined withdrawal, angled away from expected search sectors, riding parallel to known shipping lanes without crossing them directly. The commander studied the chart. He anticipated how the escorts would think. They would project torpedo tracks outward and search along those lines. They would assume retreat toward deeper water. They would sweep in expanding arcs. So he did not retreat directly. He moved obliquely. The boat cut across empty sea lanes at shallow angles, blending into fishing traffic routes and natural wave patterns. Engines were adjusted constantly to avoid forming a straight, trackable line. Behind them, the smoke column still marked the convoy's position. Ahead of them, only horizon. No one aboard celebrated. Small craft warfare carried no illusions. Success meant exposure. Exposure meant vulnerability. The longer they remained within probable search range, the thinner their margin became. At one point, the faint drone of aircraft engines drifted across the sky. The crew instinctively froze. The boat reduced speed further, minimizing wake. From distance, it would resemble nothing more than a drifting fishing hull. The aircraft passed. No signal. No attack. The ocean resumed its blank expression. By mid-morning, the American craft had slipped beyond immediate search grids. The crew allowed themselves the smallest exhale, not relief, but transition. The mission had not required annihilation. It required proof. Proof that convoy geometry could be pierced. Proof that escort doctrine had blind seams. Proof that a small boat could create disproportionate disruption. That proof now burned on the water behind them. When they reached friendly waters later, reports would be precise, almost understated. 2 confirmed hits, additional probable damage, no contact with escort forces. The words would not capture the real achievement. The convoy had never identified its attacker. It had reacted to fire without understanding origin. And in naval warfare, uncertainty compounds faster than loss. The American boat returned to base without fanfare. But somewhere between Rabaul and the Solomon Sea, a convoy commander would rewrite patrol arcs. An escort officer would question radar assumptions. A staff planner would reconsider how small craft fit into the threat model. The ghost wake did not leave wreckage as large as a submarine wolfpack might. It left doubt. And doubt, once introduced into convoy operations, reshapes every future night at sea. By afternoon, the incident report reached regional command. It was precise, factual, devoid of emotion. 2 transports destroyed, 1 heavily damaged, escort screen intact, no confirmed visual contact with attacking vessel, possible submarine, possible fast surface craft, no radar confirmation. That last line carried weight. No radar confirmation. In 1943, radar was confidence. It represented modernization, vigilance, control over darkness. If radar showed nothing, commanders assumed nothing significant had passed through. Now radar had shown nothing, and ships were burning. Staff officers began reconstructing the geometry. Torpedo bearings were plotted carefully. Estimated firing angles were overlaid against escort patrol arcs. The conclusions were uncomfortable. The attack vector had not originated outside the screen. It had slipped through it. This challenged more than positioning. It challenged assumption. Escort doctrine emphasized outward vigilance, submarines below, aircraft above, destroyers approaching from open water. It did not fully account for something small, low profile, and deliberate enough to use sea clutter as concealment. Convoy procedures were quietly adjusted. Patrol arcs widened inward. Radar operators were instructed to treat intermittent returns with more suspicion. Night watch rotations were tightened. But no immediate solution presented itself. You cannot easily guard against what leaves no signature. And that was the unsettling truth. The conv had not been overwhelmed. It had been bypassed. What made the ghost wake effective was not brute force. It was scale. Large warships generate presence. They announce themselves through wake, sound, and radar return. Even submarines, when firing from periscope depth, leave patterns that can be traced. Small craft operate differently. They exploit clutter. They blend into background. They move where destroyers cannot maneuver comfortably and where radar resolution degrades near the surface. In the Pacific Theater of 1943, this asymmetry mattered. Japanese convoy strategy was designed to counter threats of scale, submarine packs, air raids, surface raiders. A low-profile American boat did not match those templates. It required a different defensive philosophy, one that assumed penetration rather than prevention. The success of the attack was not measured only in tonnage sunk. It was measured in doctrinal discomfort. From that night forward, escort commanders could not fully trust empty radar screens. And that uncertainty altered behavior. Ships moved more cautiously, search patterns became denser, fuel consumption increased, fatigue accumulated faster. The cost of invisibility was not just damage. It was sustained vigilance. For the sailors aboard surviving transports, the memory settled differently. They remembered the explosions, the sudden light, the shockwave across steel decks. What they did not remember, what they could not remember, was the attacker. No silhouette cut across the horizon, no gun flashes revealed direction, no aircraft roared overhead. The sea simply ignited around them. That absence lingered. It is one thing to fight a visible enemy. It is another to burn without ever seeing who fired. Convoy warfare depends on confidence in perimeter. When that perimeter is breached invisibly, every dark wave becomes suspect. Every flicker on radar becomes potential threat. Every unexplained wake invites imagination. The ghost wake created a psychological echo disproportionate to the tonnage lost. The sea had not betrayed them. Their expectations had. The Pacific at night had once favored submarines. Now it favored those who understood radar's blind seams. Technology does not eliminate vulnerability, it relocates it. Radar expanded vision across miles of darkness, but near the surface, in sea clutter and shallow approach angles, its clarity degraded. The American boat did not defeat radar. It navigated around its strengths. Convoy defense would evolve, patrol arcs would tighten, radar interpretation would improve, small craft threats would be integrated into planning. But on July 13, 1943, doctrine lagged just enough. And in naval warfare, just enough is decisive. The ghost wake was not a fleet action. It was not a massive engagement marked by dozens of ships. It was a seam exploited. A geometry misunderstood. A small American boat riding low enough to become background. The Japanese convoy had prepared for submarines below and aircraft above. It had built a screen designed for visible threats. It did not anticipate something that would pass through quietly, fire precisely, and leave without leaving a shape. By dawn, the sea looked the same. But convoy warfare in the Western Pacific had changed subtly. From that night forward, emptiness on radar no longer guaranteed safety. Because sometimes the most dangerous threat is not the one you detect, but the one that blends into the water, leaves only a fading ripple, and is gone before you ever learn its name.